Hello everyone, thank you all for joining and welcome to Silico's inaugural webinar, the first of hopefully many more to come. I'm thrilled to introduce this webinar today. My name's Jordan and I'm joined by my two colleagues, Dan and Martin. All of us work alongside each other within Silico's customer success team. Our focus today will be exploring how processes can be optimized by using business process simulation. During our session, we'll navigate through the fundamentals, covering the journey we're traveling on to reach an autonomous enterprise, the basics of what business process simulation is. We'll delve into the benefits that business process simulation brings to your process optimization efforts, followed by a live demonstration of Silico's platform. Through this demo, you'll see how you can achieve real-time insights, evaluate scenarios, and generate optimal solutions. And for those of you eager to embark on this journey yourselves, we've got you covered. We'll provide you with actionable steps to start your venture into the world of business process simulation within your organization. And finally, we'll hold a question and answer session. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can, so feel free to post your questions throughout the webinar. So Dan, Martin and I are excited to kick off this exploration into business process simulation. Our first area being the journey of to an autonomous enterprise, what is business process simulation, and just some of the benefits this can bring. So we find ourselves on this journey of transformative change, hitting key moments of importance in the pursuit of an autonomous enterprise and processes. From the early days of fully manual and paper-based processes, we've progressed into a period of globalization when complex operational systems such as ERPs became a necessity for organizations to thrive. This led to ERP-centric processes requiring the adoption of process management tools and methodologies to find and drive improvements. We then moved into the next period where cost savings were a key priority. We were guided towards technologies such as process mining to find inefficiencies and identify potential cost-saving solutions, opening the door for us to explore untapped areas of transformation, automation, or business process outsourcing. We now find ourselves on the cusp of this next transformative stage, bringing us one step closer towards a fully autonomous enterprise, one in which we can create digital twins of our organizations and utilize cutting-edge technologies such as AI, next-gen automation, and process simulation to realize that goal. However, we find ourselves in a place where process intelligence can often be a barrier to reaching that next step, as processes are dynamic, interdependent, and sensitive to the smallest of changes. One small change in a process can have costly impacts on another, often going unquantified until it's too late. An analysis today is not as intelligent as it could be. We often see processes being analysed in isolation, using historic snapshots and one-off spreadsheet calculations to make business change decisions that have far-reaching impacts. And this makes it difficult for us to see the objective impacts of process change on operational and commercial outcomes, creating an intelligence gap between process discovery and change and what this actually means to business outcomes. And this is where process simulation steps in to bridge that gap, enabling process discovery and process change to be linked directly to business outcomes, forming the stepping stones of your first digital process twin. And process simulation is an entry point for the creation of a digital twin. You can start small by taking incremental steps, expanding across your processes and into your physical operations. As these linked processes grow and are enriched with real-time data, we'll find ourselves moving towards a true digital twin of the organization. So now that we've set the scene for the journey we're on, we can now explore what is business process simulation and what benefits can it bring to reaching our destination. So the basic definition of simulation is to imitate a situation or process. So similar to how planes are tested in the safe environment of a wind tunnel to see how they'll perform under differing conditions, you can broadly imagine business process simulation as a wind tunnel for your transformation ideas and process improvements, letting you test and try different changes to see how they will impact your operational and commercial outcomes, finding those optimal solutions without the costly risk of getting it wrong in the real world. And business process simulation with Silico is a comprehensive tool for evaluating change. creating a true-to-life simulation model of a process, replicating its structure and enriching it with data, and then using this to test forward-looking scenarios and process variations and receive back quantitative results linked directly to the outcomes that you care about. And the long-term vision of this being the formation of a digital twin in which multiple process simulations are linked together, being fed by real-time data. And utilizing business process simulation, Silico strives to bring this vision to reality, where every organization has a digital twin of its own resources and processes and is able to seamlessly link these to business impacts, running simulations to continuously control their processes and systems, identifying potential issues before they occur, and taking action to resolve and optimize. Now we've covered the basics of what business process simulation is, we can expand into what benefits it brings to your transformation and optimization. So business process simulation forms a valuable link in addition to process discovery and process mining techniques, connecting those insights into quantifiable business actions and outcomes. It can provide a valuable and comprehensive source of truth by using multiple data sources to replicate complex business processes. Through simulation linked to this quality data, it becomes possible to visualize, analyze, and experiment with various scenarios in a controlled environment, offering a reliable foundation for data-driven decision-making, creating a point of reference that captures the dynamics of real-world operations. And this source of truth provides insights into the potential outcomes of different decisions and strategies, aiding decision support through those informed choices. And by also analysing how different factors impact the process and business outcomes, organisations can develop and test strategies to mitigate risk. So having the ability to do this in a scalable solution means processes can be linked together to form an enterprise-level simulation, moving towards a digital twin of the organisation. It's also a powerful tool for solution evaluation. By modelling business processes, organisations can test future scenarios or changing markets in real time, allowing stakeholders to assess the potential impacts of different strategies, minimising uncertainty and maximising the probability of identifying the route to success. So by testing what-if scenarios through simulations, you can see results straight away. This is particularly valuable when you're evaluating multiple scenarios, enabling you to take informed action. It also provides a structured framework for measuring and quantifying the impact of change. By modelling different scenarios and applying performance metrics, you can objectively assess the potential benefits. And this rapid data-driven evaluation enables organisations to accelerate through the make cycle with confidence. And finally, simulation is an impressive tool for solution generation, enabling you to create solutions, test different process structures, and optimize all in one place. So this type of flexibility encourages innovation, allowing you to experiment without the real-world consequences or risks of getting it wrong. So overall, business process simulation empowers you to make informed data-driven decisions, optimize processes and transformations, and adapt to changing scenarios with pace and effectiveness. The Silico platform achieves all of this through its advanced simulation capabilities, letting users turn process maps into quantitative simulation models and run them at scale, run dynamic scenarios with unlimited parameter combinations, create process variants and simulate the impacts, and extend processes to the outcomes that they have on business metrics. So now that we've covered the basics of what business process simulation is and just a few of the many benefits it can provide, I'll now pass you over to my colleague Dan, who will be demonstrating a live example of the Silico platform, showing you how insights from process mining can be applied into valuable actions within minutes. So take it away, Dan.
Thanks, George. Hi, everyone. My name's Dan. I'm in the customer success team here at Silico, and I'm going to be walking you through an order-to-cash model, which has been modelled in Silico. So what we're looking at here is the Silico platform. We're looking at the model builder here. And what we can see is an order-to-cash process that flows through from start to finish. We can see we have order volume starting here. We then have our order review process. This is essentially when the orders come into the process and it needs to be reviewed by a team. We then have our orders out process or delivery process. So this is once the order's been reviewed, it then goes to a warehouse who then generate delivery documents, pick the order, and then ship the goods. And then lastly, we have our order reconciliation process. And this is where, of course, we reconcile the order and we make sure we get payment for it. So each of these steps has a number of KPIs associated to them. We have FTEs across the whole process and within each step. And then right at the end, what we can do, what Silico allows us to do, is actually link all of this process to our business financials. So we can actually simulate the KPIs that are associated with this process. So that's all well and good, but actually, what if we want to then display this to a stakeholder or someone who actually wants to see this? So we can head over to Silico's dashboard here. And what I've done is I've just taken a few high-level KPIs for us to review today. So the first one we're going to be looking at is our lead time for the order. So right here, we have a visual. And what this has done is it's taken the historic data of the lead time and then it's simulated forward so we can get an idea of what our lead time is going to be. We started at the start of the simulation of around 6.6 days per order. And this slowly goes over time. As you can see, it's not a consistent line. It goes up and down and fluctuates until we get to the end of the simulation where we sit around 8.2 days. So looking at this at first, you might think, actually, it doesn't look too bad, but it is actually trending in the wrong direction. So there is something in this process which will need to be looked at. We then look at our orders by team here. So just going back to what I mentioned in the previous screen, we have split up the order here in 3 different teams. We have our order in review, our orders in delivery, and our orders in reconciliation. So that tells us in the process where are most of the orders sitting at any one time. And in total, we can see our total backlog of orders that are in the process. We then have 2 other KPIs. We have our profit, which of course is an extremely important one, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to care about. That's how much money is this process actually making us as a business. And then lastly, an interesting one, which is the revenue actually stuck in the process. So this is the total value of orders that are actually sat in the process that aren't currently being processed. So as a first point here of what Silico allows us to do, we can actually simulate KPIs and metrics that are important to the business, and we can get a financial number off the back of that, which we can then use to provide to the wider business. So what else can we do with this? So it's all well and good having these KPIs, but what actually can we actually do with this? So the second thing that I'm going to talk about that Silico allows us to do is to actually fundamentally change any of the variables or any numbers in the simulation to see what will happen on the output. So let's say, for an example, we have the order review team, the first point of the process, which is this set here. And what we want to do is, let's say we want to maybe reduce this team by 1 person. So what we can actually do is we can make that change in our digital twin before we make the change in real life to see what impact that will have. So right here, I have an input, which is our order review team. It's currently set at 6. So as the current team was 6 anyway, we don't see any changes there. But if we actually reduce it by just 1 person, we can actually start to see what impact that will have. So in a first sort of situation, you probably think, oh, 1 person, it probably won't be too much of an impact. So when we actually simulate the change, going back to what George said earlier, a small change at one end can actually have quite a large impact on the other side. We can see if we just reduce the process by 1 FTE in this particular step, all of a sudden our lead time has gone from 6 days to 140 odd days. I think that's quite telling, really, isn't it? That you can make a small change and have a massive impact and not actually realize how big that impact is on the business. If you wanted to look at a financial cost to that, you were making 534 million. By reducing the head by 1 head, you've now lost 100 million in your profit just from reducing the FTE by 1 number. And our revenue stuck in process has now gone from 16 million to 111 million. You might be asking, why is this? Well, if we look at our orders per team, we can see that because we've reduced that 1 person in that first team, all of the orders are now stuck in that team and cannot be processed. So this could actually also result in a much lower customer success score and things like further backlogs throughout the process and cancelled orders as well. So other things to consider. So that's one thing we can do with Silico. The other thing that we can actually do is present a scenario where a high level input into the process actually changes. So what we're going to simulate today is, let's say our marketing team have done a stellar job like they always do, and they have actually managed, we're actually predicting 10% more orders next year compared to what we had this year. So we can actually simulate this now. I've set up a scenario here for 10% annual growth. So we now see two colors on the dashboard. The blue line was our base case. The green line is what the process looks like with this new scenario with input, which in this case is a 10% annual order growth. All of a sudden, we can see now our lead time has gone from eight days, what it was originally, to now at the end of simulation, we're looking at 40 days. So there's this trending curve going upwards here. We then have our orders by team again, where we're seeing more backlogs. Our profit, you would think, would 10% more orders. You probably think you'd be rubbing your hands together, but actually, because we can't process the amount of orders coming in, we're only seeing an extra 41K on the bottom line. And I think the big number here is our revenue stuck in process. It's gone from 16 million to 42.79 million stuck in process because it just cannot be processed. And I think it's quite a big number, if you would agree. So just to recap what we've covered so far, Silico allows us to simulate KPI metrics on business impact and actually fundamentally change any variables or any scenarios that may impact this simulation. So we can run what-if scenarios over a variety of different things and actually see how the process will perform under those scenarios. The last thing I want to cover is, it's all well and good having this, but what can we actually do about it? So this is where we can actually use Silico now to present solutions to overcome these problems. So we're going to head back into our model builder, and we're actually going to start to look at where the backlog may be that actually causes the growth. So we knew from the first time that I mentioned that there was a big backlog within our first stage of the process, and we can actually look at this by looking at some of the steps in that stage. So in our order review process, we're actually quite lucky. There's only 2 steps in this phase. We can have a look at both of those and see what's going on. So in each of these processes, we have some sub-steps here. We can click into these and we can actually look at what's going on at each stage. So the first thing that happens here is the order is received, and then we have a branching here where some orders need to be credit checked, some can go straight through to confirm order. Because we know the majority of almost all the volume is coming into this step, let's have a look at the confirm order step. So what we have here is a basic process step here for the confirm order phase. So I'm just going to walk you through this now, just so we all understand what's happening. We have our new orders coming in. They then go into a waiting queue, and there is a 1-day wait before these orders are actually put into the queue to be processed. We then have a backlog, and then we can get these orders reviewed by somebody. So what we have here is the manual processing time, the reviews per day, and then the max that we can actually review. Because there's 6 FTE, we can review this amount each day. This then equates to what we can see here, which in our green scenario, which matches this line here, we can see there is a backlog. So what can we actually do about actually resolving this issue? So using Silico's structural variant tool, we can actually now make different versions of this step of the process and see what the outcomes is actually going to be on this. So currently we have it as is. The first thing, say a transformation team that are coming in, and they're going to say, let's have a look. We've reviewed this step and we don't actually understand why there's a wait time here. So they want to simulate what would happen if we just remove this wait time. How is that going to affect the rest of the process? So we can select our confirm order here, and we can see we have one set up already with no waiting time. So we're going to select that, and now you can see the wait time has disappeared. We can now see that our orders in step is reduced by about 3,000 to what it was before. So we haven't solved a problem as such, we've just reduced the problem by a slight amount. So there is some benefit to that, but overall, in terms of the wider business outcome, it hasn't really provided much benefit. And that's fine. That's one of the great things about having a digital twin, when you can experiment with these solutions. There's no risk in changing these. You're not doing it in the real time, so it's absolutely fine. The next one we're going to look at is the transformation team have looked at the orders that are coming in, and they've noticed that 30% of the orders that have coming in are actually coming from the same customers. So they believe they can actually set up an automation with that customer to make a repeat order. What that will do is it will save 30% of the team's time, and the rest of the time can be spent processing new orders. So we have here another scenario set up with the waiting time removed and 30% automation added to the process. Now we can see that the process has changed quite differently from what we saw before. The orders can come in. We then have a branching of an automation percentage, and we can see that 30% are now automated and go straight through to the next phase of the process. 70% still require manual confirmation, but the big thing we can see here is now, when we look at this, the backlog has removed. So we know that if we just automated just 30% of the orders coming in, we are now back on track and can actually process all the orders that are coming in without having to hire any more people. We won't actually lose any heads either with the automation. It will just be 30% automation, which will benefit the process. So we can go back into our dashboard and we can actually look at what impact this is going to have. So if you look at the process before, we can see that here was the backlog. This is where we were before. We can see where the backlog was. The transformation team can actually straight away understand that if you see there's 100K orders in that first phase of the process, and that's where they need to look. If we now select our no waiting time plus 30% automation process change, all of a sudden, we now telling a different story to what we were before. Our lead times are now consistent. It actually solves the issue we saw at the start as well when we saw it rising to 8 days. We now have 6 days to start. By the end of the simulation, we're now looking at a lead time of 5.4 days. So just automating 30% of that one step has made a massive difference on the process as a whole. We can see that our profit has now gone from 536 million to 560 million pounds. Just making one automation step of 30% has unlocked 23 million pounds in the process. And then lastly, our revenue stuck in process has gone from 42 million in the new scenario to 15.9. So we've managed to unlock almost 30 million there as well that was stuck in the process. So just to summarize what we've covered today. First point, Silico allows us to simulate KPIs and metrics on a business impact and then present that to stakeholders who may need to see it. We can then change any variable in the simulation, whether that be volumes, number of heads, the amount of time it takes to do something, a wait time, a customer time, anything. We can change those and measure what that change will do to the process as a whole. And then lastly, we can then simulate solutions and change the structure of the process fundamentally and then see how that outcome looks on the process as a whole. So I hope this has given you a comprehensive view of what Silico can do. I'm now going to hand you over to Martin, who's going to go through next steps and how you can get started on your business process simulation journey. Over to you, Martin.
Great, thanks, Dan. So I'm Martin, and I'm going to take you through this last part of the webinar, where we'll have a look at what data you need to actually get started with business process simulation, what the process looks like and how long it takes to actually get sort of a simulation-ready digital twin of your process, and then what you can expect at the end of that time. So to get started with data, so what do we, as a customer success team, when you work with you, actually need to do sort of a business process simulation process? What do we actually need from you to actually generate that digital twin of your process? The first thing is we need to know about the digital twin structure, which is normally about the structure of the actual process. As a second category, we then need to know essentially what data points do you have about that process. And then we need to know what are sort of the key levers or KPIs that you actually want to implement in there that sort of facilitate your use cases and that actually drive value for you. And if you have a look at each of those in detail, so if we start with that structure, so that you normally need to know what are the activities or the steps that make up your process. And that can come from either of two ways. So usually it comes from either as a process map. So you have a diagram of your process where you've got it drawn out. These are the steps. These are sort of the sequence in which they happen. And then we can replicate that in our software. Or you've done process or task mining. So you used an event log from your IT system, and you've discovered basically what are the activities that happen in that system and in what order are they done, sort of how much is flowing through them. So generally that's sort of as a first step, we just need to know sort of what does that process actually look like, so we can replicate that in Silico and essentially create the same process structure as a virtual replica of that. Our next section then is sort of what are those actual data points that we need as input values in there. There's a couple of ones that we always need, which are essentially case activity volumes. So if you think about Dan's demo earlier, we had an order to cash process. And one of the things that go into are there, how many new orders do we receive every day over a certain period of time? How many of those orders actually go, for example, to a credit check that's done externally? So we need to know those volumes so we can sort of feed those volumes into the process and simulate the impact of that volume, but also sort of split it over different branches of the process. And then there's essentially sort of two types of steps that we normally have to deal with. There are sort of external steps, so things we can't really control. So for example, if an external party does our credit check, like in that demo, we might just send them a customer that wants to buy a product, and we hear back after then, let's say 1 day later, 3 days later, whatever that time period is. And we just need to know how long is that wait time until we hear back from an external party. And similar things apply in other processes, like a service process where we're waiting for more information from a customer, or a purchase to pay process where we're waiting for a delivery from a supplier, where sort of outside our control of how quickly things happen. So these are sort of external steps where we need a wait time. And then there's internal steps where we actually have our resources or our FTEs or a piece of equipment doing the job and processing cases. And in those cases, we need to know two things. So if there is automation, what percentage is it? So does it cover 50% of cases or 80% of cases? And if there is manual processing on a case, how long does that take on average? So does putting an order into the system take 5 minutes or 10 minutes, for example? And then we need to know if we've got multiple teams or a single teams in a process that actually does this manual processing, we need to know sort of what is the sort of capacity or the team size of each of the teams in our process. And if we think about where all those data points come from, what we normally see is that case and activity volumes oftentimes sit in, let's say, an ERP or a CRM system, and they're quite easy to get. And similarly, FTE capacity is very easy to get because people know how many people on their team and are on the payroll, and with some very simple assumptions about holidays and time off and these sort of things, we can get to good numbers with them. And then what we see that people might have to search in their organization a bit where data points for wait times, automation rates, or processing times come from. So at one end of the spectrum is people who've done task or process mining, and they probably have them straight away at hand because they've done that as part of their mining exercise. And on the other end is sort of what we normally see is those information pieces sit at different points in the organization. And one of the points that Jordan mentioned earlier in his sort of benefits of a digital twin is it's a single source of truth for everyone. So there might be, for example, an operations team who already thought about how automated our process is and how long does each task take to use that for capacity planning. And then we can use that same information and build it in a digital twin with all these other data points. So you have one sort of unified view where all these different data points about your process sit, and people can make decisions knowing sort of all the other data points that they might not always consider. And these are essentially our first two categories of data we need. So we have the structure of the digital twin and those data points. And that's all we need to sort of build your as-is process or build a digital twin of that as-is process. And then there's sort of this third category, which is sort of all about the question, what do you actually want to do with this? So like, what do you want to do beyond the process? Of what KPIs do you care about or your stakeholders care about? So are financial outcomes like we've seen in the demo, like profit, for example, or is it not just lead times, which is quite process centric, but is it actually the relationship of lead times to things like a customer satisfaction score using like an NPS score, for example? So what are those KPIs that you want to see and that we sort of build around the process? And then it's about sort of what do you want to change over the process? So we've got your as-is process, we've got sort of historical order volume, so we can sort of use that bit for forecasting. But what changes do you want to see that might affect the process? So in the demo earlier, we had a increase in volume or like a growth in volume over time, which might be interesting for many. Or a typical example that we might want to see regarding scenarios is a change in headcount or capacity to just experiment. Okay, if this does change, if we get more orders or if you change capacity, this is how our process will perform in that future. And then the final part here is figuring out what is sort of the scope of changes that are possible to this process. So is it why you've got different automation ideas, for example, or you're thinking about allocating people across teams differently, or you're thinking about training people up differently and making sure that's cross-skilled across different tasks? Like, what is the sort of realm of options you have that you want to experiment with, and where you want to quantify what the impact is, and then in the end find sort of the optimal course of action? And if we have those three things, so the structure of that digital twin, the data points, and you have a first idea about what use case you've got here, then we sort of ready to start our process where we rapidly get you to a valuable digital twin. And that's sort of what we'll have a look at next, which is all about sort of how you get to something valuable quickly once you have those data points. And what we think is sort of most important is starting with not just sort of to start modeling, but actually take a step back and think about what are our customers trying to achieve with their transformation project. So thinking about, what is the process they're working on? What is the problem they're trying to solve in this process, or maybe even prevent proactively in that process? And then figure out how do they think simulation adds value to what they're already doing. And that then determines our project requirements, our success criteria, and our deliverables. And then there might be additional data requirements based beyond the ones we've just covered, if they sort of have a different scope, and that sort of determines our timeline then. But generally, sort of, we can start exchanging those first materials or data points I've just sort of went over. And then what we do in the next week is actually sit again down with those stakeholders and then just plan out and play back to them what we want, sort of what they've told us in this first week. So basically, it's agreeing and sort of signing off deliverables. And then could I get my next slide, please? Thank you. So sit down with them again a week later, agree and sign off those deliverables, make sure there's nothing that we misunderstood or that might be missing from them. And just to make sure we're all sort of on the same page about what they will get after sort of a 4-week iterative development process. And because we're doing these two things sort of 2 weeks apart, if there are additional data requirements, then people normally have a first idea of where to get that data from, or might even have it ready so we can straight away start generating that digital twin. And the way we do that is essentially sort of a 4-week highly iterative process. So as a first sort of step, we just generate a digital twin of probably just the process itself, based on, let's say, the process map or a process mining graph. We parameterize that with those data points we've got. And then we just sort of sit down again and run people through it to make sure that where there was sort of any ambiguity in the materials or data, that we sort of fix those and make sure we've implemented it correctly. And then we sort of start scoping out, okay, what are these other things you've mentioned that you want in there? And those sort of, that feedback we sort of integrate in the second week, where we just iterate on it and we expand the digital twin to, let's say, a financial model that we incorporate with it. And then again, we've basically got a whole sort of model structure of it ready in about 2 weeks that we can again play back to our customer and then specify sort of those use cases that we have. So use cases might be essentially what you have a stakeholder with a specific problem or question, and they might want a dashboard with these inputs and these outcomes, just like the ones that Dan has shown you earlier. And we demonstrate those back to them in our 3rd week, and then just make sure they're sort of exactly what people wanted and train them up on actually using them. Again, there might be sort of another iteration on those dashboards, but then generally in our 4th week, we've sort of delivered this whole project. So it's just now to sort of incorporate final feedback, guide people through the digital twin on what its abilities are, what it's included, and train them on actually using it, and then agreeing next step. And those next step might be operationalizing it, so maybe connecting it to live data sources, or it might be expanding and growing it, which might mean sort of working with the same stakeholders, let's say a transformation team. We've done something about automation with them, so maybe a next use case might be a complete process redesign. It might be enlarging the scope of stakeholders we work with using the same digital twin. So going from just the transformation team to also helping operational decision makers. Or those next steps might be expanding the digital twin beyond this just one process. So for example, connecting an order to cash process to a lead to order process. And then usually what we see is sort of the value generated is greater than sort of the individual sums of these two processes. And once we sort of delivered this sort of digital twin in 4 weeks using our highly iterative process, what you can normally expect is essentially that is sort of the value you see falls into 4 different buckets and 3 different sort of areas, sorry. The first one is sort of delivering better for customers, so that you sort of provide a better service for customers if it's a customer service process, that you deliver quicker if it's, for example, a delivery order to cash process. And what that in the end trickles down to is improving the conversion rates, but also retaining more customers. So you're sort of winning more business and maintaining more business. Our next sort of area might then be financials, sort of improving your bottom line. And obviously, if you improve customers and you have a customer-facing process, but if there's orders getting stuck because it's slow, that might also sort of free up revenue in the same process. But then it might also be the other side of it, which is finding automation opportunities or right-sizing your organization to sort of deliver the same things at a lower cost base. And then there's sort of our final area, which is all about reducing risk. So you might have service level agreements with customers, or there might be sort of determined by regulators, or you might have sort of other sort of ESG targets or sustainability metrics that you want to hit. And then we can see that people might want to sort of figure out how their processes or how their business processes actually link to those ESG outcomes. So we've got sort of 3 areas of value, which is winning more customers, sort of improving your margin, protecting your reputation, and reducing risks. And we can normally get to that probably within the sort of 4 to 6 week pilot process if we have those data points that I've outlined at the beginning. And Dan, could you get that? Thank you. And if you've got sort of any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A section at the bottom, or you can also email us at webinar@silicoai.com. And just to sort of recap what we've went over today, we sort of explained what business process simulation is, sort of what the benefits are, so having a single source of truth, generating solutions and quantifying their impact. We've shown you that demo of an order to cash process, and what sort of the value is and how that actually sort of manifests in a digital twin, and then what the process of getting there is, so what the data requirements are, how we can get to value quickly, and what that value is that you can expect at the end of that process. And with that, I think we'll open up the floor to some questions and answers.
Yeah, so thank you all for your interest throughout. We'll run through some answers to your questions now. So I'll chuck these to yourself, Dan and Martin. I'll let you know which one I'm giving to you. So we've got the first one here. What processes are suitable for process simulation? Do you want to answer that one, Dan?
Yeah, really, there isn't really a limit on what is suitable. I mean, we've had quite a few different use cases, and there seems to be more and more use cases open up as we go through. But of course, you have the usual suspects, your order to cash, purchase to pay. But then, of course, we can open it up to sort of a supply chain or maybe a manufacturing process. Another interesting area could be customer support, customer service, sort of looking at how many tickets come in and what can you do to automate certain answers that maybe your regular asked questions, and actually look at what is the best area to automate. But really, we've had many different use cases. And to be honest, I guess the sky's kind of the limit on what type of processes are the best to use.
Thanks, Dan. The next question is going to be for you, Martin. How difficult is process simulation to use or teach a team to use?
I think maybe to give you an idea of 2 different types of users. So I think there are users we work with who basically just see a dashboard. And then it's as easy as sort of what Dan has shown you. You've got a slider input or maybe a slightly more complex input for sort of a time series, but it's just changing those on a dashboard. And I don't think there's any sort of training required there. And then there's sort of the users who actually want to go into the digital twin itself and change things. And on that level, I think most of the things on the interface, because it's highly visual, is quite user-friendly and can be picked up fairly quickly. And all the maths behind it are usually fairly sort of standardized equations. They're all very simple. And you've also have sort of us 3 from the customer success team and the other people at Silico to support you at that. So I think it's, but you've got a dashboard users where I don't think there's any training requirement really. And then you've got the use of digital twins. I think we can get up to speed fairly quickly. And generally, I think we've made this fairly user-friendly.
Thanks, Martin. So another question for you, Dan. So a bit of a 2-pronged one. So what other things or KPIs can I connect to this process? And what KPIs have you found current users like to connect to the simulations?
Well, it's a good one. Again, it really depends on what your business cares about. I mean, we are seeing ESGs coming up quite a lot, especially with the government's target of 2050. There does seem to be quite a lot of noise around ESG. But I think one that we've worked with recently, automation rates. So they wanted to make sure their automation rate was high as possible. That was a really important KPI for them. And then you see the likes of your lead time. So how long it takes time to deliver. But then you've also got, as well as the full length of the process, actually what part of the KPI can we actually determine. So time to deliver was a really important one. So they wanted to know from when the order started, how long did it take them to actually deliver the item. But then another important one as well, which is coming up quite a lot, is NPS score and CSAT. So that's quite an important one that we see quite a few times. But other than that, you have your usual suspects as well, your manual handling times, your wait times, and all the sort of standard process KPIs that we see.
Thanks, Dan. And then another question for yourself, Martin. So a 2-pronged one again. So is your simulation based on one system for the end-to-end process, or are there parts of the process in different systems?
Okay. Yeah, so I think generally our simulations can span beyond a single sort of system, essentially. I guess it sort of depends on whether you've done process mapping or mining a bit. Like process maps, generally we see a lot of cases, particularly there, where a process we get and an import actually spans lots of different systems and lots of different teams. Right, so then the structure itself goes beyond sort of teams and systems, and then data points we can take and combine data points from multiple systems. So you might have, if you go into the data, think about the data point slide again, right? You might have an order to cash process. The new orders come from a CRM system as a sort of daily data update, whereas maybe the sort of FTE resources come from a different system, let's say an HR system. And all of these can be combined in sort of the single source of truth.
Thanks, Martin. So we've got a load of questions that have come in. Unfortunately, I've got enough time to answer them all. So we will be making a frequently asked questions document, which we can send on to you all. But that's it from ourselves. Thank you all for participating in our first webinar. It's been a pleasure to share this exploration into business process simulation with yourselves. If you'd like to get in touch with us or you have any questions that you'd like to discuss further, please reach out to us at webinars@silicoai.com. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Bye all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.